All right, good morning, everybody.
Turn up the volume.
Oh, no. Not that. Welcome to, I have to look at the date. What is today's date? April 8th, 2024, hard to believe. Welcome to the EID regular board meeting. Can we have roll call, please?
The meeting was opened at 9 a.m. Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Day, and Anzini present. Director Camp absent. General Manager Abercrombie. Board Clerk Sullivan, Senior Deputy Counsel Leeper present. General Counsel Polson is present, but in the audience.
All right, thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do I have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
I'll move that we adopt today's agenda.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Is there any public comment on the adoption of the agenda? Not on items on the agenda, but just on the adoption.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll go to communications, employee recognition. Jim?
Good morning. I have one today. The district received a call from one of our EID customers, Steve Wilkinson, in appreciation of Leland K., one of our distribution operators. In his communication, Mr. Wilkinson expressed gratitude for the assistance Leland provided to him during a recent interaction while EID crews were making repairs on a line break near his home. It just is another example of good communication to our customers makes all the difference in the world. So congratulations, Leland. That concludes my recognition report.
Thank you. Always good to hear. Is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda related to EID?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak during our public comment period for items not on today's agenda.
All right, thank you. Any communications from the board? No? Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, last month, I conducted a tour. Actually, I didn't do it. Dan did it, and the staff. But I participated in a tour taking the general manager of the El Dorado County Water Agency, Rebecca Gow, to the intake pump station at Folsom Lake, the treatment plant, and the wastewater treatment plant, and one of the storage tanks at Bass Lake that was being redone. It's the first of 3 tours that we're going to provide her, and I think it's really healthy to get our partners to understand our operations and some of our challenges. So it went quite well. Hats off to Dan and staff for doing a great job showcasing our assets.
I think that's great. I think it's positive, hopefully, for our relationships, too. Yep. George, do you have anything? Good. All right. I don't have anything either. Jennifer?
No, thank you, none today.
And Jim?
None today, thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve today's consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on items on today's consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the approval of today's consent calendar. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we'll move on to public hearing. Item number 5, we'll open the public hearing at 9:07 a.m.
All right. Good morning, Board, General Manager, General Counsel, and welcome members of the public to the Slide Park Intertie Improvements Project Environmental Impact Report Public Hearing. My name's Doug Venable. I'm an Environmental Review Analyst with the district. Next slide, please. Yes, sir. Or a louder voice. I'm a bit soft-spoken here until my kids mess up, and then different story. All right, in today's outline of our presentation, we're going to be going over the background and a brief overview of the project. We'll be going over the environmental review process that we did for the project. We'll then be asking the board for their consideration and certification of the environmental impact report and the project approval in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Next slide, please. A bit of project background. The Sly Park Intertie, or SPI as we like to call it, originally was built in 1978 in response to the 1976-77 regional drought. It originally conveyed water, untreated water from Reservoir 1 directly into Jenkinson Lake. And back in 1992, the Cleveland fire burned down a portion of the El Dorado Canal, cutting off supplies to Reservoir 1. And in response in 1993, a pump station was built at Reservoir A to move water from Jenkinson Lake back up to Reservoir 1. So after 35 years of service, the SPI was decommissioned in 2013 due to advanced corrosion and ongoing major leaks. Next slide, please. So just looking at a bit of the water supplies that the district is supplied with, this is a map of the district service area. On the right-hand side, you can see Jenkinson Lake and the South Fork American River, and on the left there is Folsom Lake. So in the top right of our map, the South Fork American River delivers water to our Reservoir 1 by way of the El Dorado Canal. And Jenkinson Lake, of course, supplies Reservoir A. And on the left there again, Folsom Lake supplies our El Dorado Hills water treatment plant. Next slide, please. And this is a map of the district's major transmission lines, again with Jenkinson Lake on the right. You may be able to make out a couple blue dots on the left-hand side. That's Cameron Park and Bass Lake. And for reference, Highway 49 is roughly right there in the middle. So Reservoir 1 and Reservoir A are located on the east side of this map, and they deliver drinking water from Pollock Pines all the way down to Cameron Park. and that represents about 2/3 or 66% of the water delivered by the district. The Sly Park intertie is one of only 3 major pipelines connecting the north and south transmission systems here. And it's also located on the furthest east and the highest elevation, which allows for the most flexibility and efficiency in delivering water. The SPI project would reestablish the connection between Reservoir 1 and Reservoir A. Excuse me. And this goes a long way for efficiency and supply throughout the entire system. Next slide, please. So Reservoir 1 is located in Pollock Pines off of Pony Express Trail, and Reservoir A is located below Jenkinson Lake off of Sly Park Road by the U.S. Forest Service Sierra Springs Fire Station. And it's approximately 6 miles from Reservoir 1 to Reservoir A. Next slide, thank you. The project objectives are to improve drinking water reliability with a bidirectional pipeline, provide uninterrupted drinking water supply during an emergency or a scheduled plant shutdown. This means that Reservoir A or Reservoir 1 will be able to supply the entire system. Reduce energy by maximizing gravity flows and utilizing new high-efficiency pumps. And lastly, to improve water quality and reduce the scale and cost of water quality treatments. The proposed project would replace approximately 6 miles of existing pipeline. It would be primarily installed in the existing alignment with 8 staging areas and 13 access points. The construction corridor would be approximately 50 feet wide. That's 25 feet on each side of the pipeline. And that would be reduced to 30 feet wide or 15 feet on each side of the pipeline over creek crossings. Here's a project map of the SPI identifying different property owners, the staging areas, and access points. The project has been divided into 4 segments based on equipment access and construction methods. The top of the map is segment 1, and that is located entirely within a roadway on Pony Express Trail and Ridgeway Drive, and it's about half a mile long. Segment 2, which is the largest and longest part of the pipeline project, is about 4.5 miles, and it goes from Ridgeway Drive all the way down to Reservoir A. Segment 3 at the bottom of the map is located entirely within the Reservoir A facility, which includes the new pump station. And lastly, segment 4 is the last half mile of the project from Reservoir A up to the distribution system by the Sly Park Environmental Education Center. This is an interesting slide. It's an elevation profile of the project as it travels from the left-hand side, which is Reservoir 1, to the right-hand side where Reservoir A, where the end of the project is. There's only about 450 feet difference between the 2 treatment plants, with Reservoir A being at the higher elevation. But as you traverse this pipeline, you go over 3,000 feet of elevation change. This presents some pretty tremendous challenges for the construction crews and equipment access to get into these narrow corridors and rugged terrain. Next slide, please. Typical construction sequencing would involve removing the vegetation. The old pipeline would be excavated and removed. The new pipeline would be placed in the trench with new bedding material. The trench would then be backfilled and compacted and restored to original contours and reseeded for ground cover. So this slide is maybe a little bit hard to understand, but it's a rendering of the pump station that's going to be constructed at the Reservoir A facility. It's going to be located on the west side of the facility and be tied into the existing distribution system. As I mentioned before, Reservoir A here is about 450 feet lower than Reservoir 1, so we're going to use new high-efficiency pumps to get that water back up to Reservoir 1. Additionally, there are some backup generators here to provide power in cases of planned or emergency power outages. Next slide. The project is scheduled to start this summer, and with typical pipeline construction advancing 120 to 160 feet per day, and that would get the project completed substantially by the end of 2025, with pipeline testing and then placed into service in 2026. So that's the brief outline of the project and overview. We're now going to be moving on to the environmental review of the process. And the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is intended to form decision makers and the public about potential environmental effects, identify ways to prevent, avoid, or reduce those significant environmental impacts, and foster public participation and promote interagency coordination. Next slide, please. Thank you. The CEQA review started over a year ago, and with a notice of preparation to solicit input from the public and public agencies on the scope and content of the EIR. We had a public scoping meeting last February 15th in 2023. And then this January, we released the draft environmental impact report for a 45-day public review and comment period. We also had a public meeting to get input from the public on February 7th. The notice of completion for the final environmental impact report was released just a couple weeks ago on March 27th. So the district has had an ongoing public outreach throughout the entire environmental review process. We have sent out notifications to local residents. We've met some local residents at their homes and property to discuss the project directly with them. We've had public meetings to discuss the environmental documents and get input. We maintain a project website with regular updates and to publish our environmental documents. And we send email notifications out to all the folks that have subscribed to that with project updates and again, those environmental documents. The website and the notifications will continue throughout the entire construction process as we get through the project. All right, slide 17. So the environmental impact report, or EIR, is made to describe the existing environmental conditions. It analyzed the environmental effects of the project, considered reasonable alternatives, discusses ways to avoid or lessen the significant environmental effects, and promoted agency and public input, not only on the scope, but also the analysis of the document. Next slide. Our draft EIR analyzed all 20 environmental factors listed in the CEQA guidelines. We conducted resource-specific studies, including field studies for things like biological and cultural resources, while modeling was used for things like air quality. The draft EIR analyzed project alternatives, including the no project alternative, which is a requirement of CEQA. It incorporated mitigation measures on the various resources that were impacted. And the draft EIR included a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, or MMRP. So this MMRP identified specific measures and the timing of these mitigations for each of the impacted resources that are listed here. The draft EIR also concluded that project impacts were going to be less than significant with these mitigation measures incorporated. Slide. So the district received 5 different comments during the 45-day public review period. We received 1 comment from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding biological surveys, plans and impacts, construction personnel training, and mitigation measures. We also received 4 different comments from adjacent property owners, and those were regarding construction noise, access, traffic, and duration, and biological impacts and fire protection. Next slide, please. The final EAR for the project includes the comments received and any changes that were made to the draft EAR. District staff reviewed and carefully considered the comments received in the draft EAR. A response to each of the comments is included in that final EAR. It was determined that no significant new information was received with the comments, therefore no substantial changes were made to the draft EIR. The final EIR also includes any revisions to help clarify the language in the draft EIR. Additionally, the final EIR includes the MMRP, which describes how the project implementation will go and how those mitigation measures will be recorded. Lastly, the final EIR affirms that there were no changes in the findings or conclusions of that draft EIR. Okay, getting to the end a bit. In order to complete the CEQA environmental review process for the Sly Park Intertie Improvements Project, staff is requesting that the board consider adopting a board resolution that will certify the EIR. It will adopt the findings of fact and MMRP and approve the project in accordance with CEQA. I'm going to go through each bullet here individually, and then I get to read them again for the board options. By certifying the final EAR, the board is confirming that the final EAR has been completed in compliance with CEQA, that the final EAR was presented to the District Board of Directors, and that the board reviewed and considered the information contained in the final EIR prior to approving the project, and the final EIR reflects the district's independent judgment and analysis. The board resolution also includes the findings of fact and MMRP, which describe how each of the significant impacts identified in EIR are mitigated. It describes measures incorporated into the project to avoid or lessen the environmental effect, discusses project alternatives, and incorporates that MMRP into the project. Finally, by adopting the resolution, the board would approve the project in accordance with CEQA, which means that the project will not have a significant effect on the environment, and the district has substantially lessened all potential significant effects on the environment. Approval of the project pursuant to CEQA does not necessarily commit the district to proceed with the project, however. Okay. That leads us to our board options that I get to read. Option 1 would be to adopt the proposed resolution, which would certify that the final EIR was presented to the Board of Directors, and the board has reviewed and considered the information contained in the final EIR prior to acting on the project. It certifies that the final EIR reflects the independent judgment and analysis of the district, and the information disclosed therein is accurate, adequate, and objective. It certifies that the final EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA. Yes, there's more. By adopting the resolution, it would adopt the findings of fact, including the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, approving the project as described in the final EIR as the Sly Park Intertie Improvements Project in accordance with CEQA, specifying that the documents or other materials which constitute the record of proceedings upon which the decision is made shall be in the custody of the clerk of the board at the district headquarters, and directing staff to file a notice of determination with the El Dorado County Clerk and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Option 2 would be to take other action as directed by the board, and option 3 would be to take no action today. Staff is recommending option 1.
Are there any board questions? George?
I'm assuming that we're going to use our fuels management crew to do the clearing before we initiate the project.
I believe that, that the vegetation clearing will be conducted by the construction company. We'll then maintain that corridor with our crews.
Okay. And obviously, we're going to be doing this in the summer, and very concerned about wildfire and welding, and so to make sure that construction people understand the rules and regulations about safe welding in a wildland environment.
100% hot work would not be allowed. There will be a fire plan associated with this project, red flag days and all the other things that restrict fire and hot work would be observed.
Thank you.
Yes, Doug, nice job. I'm concerned about the 4 comments that we got from residents along the corridor that'll be affected. As I recall, one was concerning access during the construction for emergencies. One was the noise and potential to
Disturb
bother the horses and the horseback riding academy or whatever they
Yes.
had. I can't remember the other 2. Do you?
Well, there were, you mentioned the access, you mentioned the one noise from the one property owner to the east. We had another noise concern from a property owner on, to the west.
Oh, okay.
We did look at the different proximity to construction. One of, you know, if it's going to be right on the pipeline, it would be very temporary, most likely with it going 120 to 160 feet per day. However, at the Reservoir A facility, it will be a little bit longer. And so we've reached out directly to those customers and let them know that it will be a little bit longer, but we anticipate with the location of that, with the pipeline and the construction of the pump station, it would not be a significant effect. The current project that's going on right now to replace the valves at the Reservoir A, I wouldn't anticipate it being any louder than that. So that's just my gut feeling. We will be out there to engage those property owners, though.
Okay, good, thanks. Because we make every effort to be good neighbors, I think, with the people that we serve and that are affected. Were they generally satisfied with the mitigation efforts, or?
I think so. Just once the project was explained to them, we do have some ongoing, I wouldn't say issues, but some of the neighbors there, you know, have a constant back and forth with us and asking us about our operations. So I would say that, you know, satisfied might be an exaggeration, but accepting, I think, in the temporary nature of this project.
Okay, good. I think it's important to have everyone understand how essential this project is, especially for dry years. And right now, it looks like we're pretty fortunate to have a couple of wet years where we can do this construction before it becomes essential for our operations. So, thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think just ongoing communication, I think, is the key as we go, and to let people know we're headed towards your property, and we've left the area of your property. Let us know if there's anything we need to clean up, that sort of thing. I think just communication.
Very good. Yeah, just for an example, we're going to be doing some California spotted owl surveys starting later this week. We're going to be reaching out to the neighbors, notifying law enforcement that we're going to have people there after hours. So we're trying to really engage our neighbors and let them know how this project's progressing.
Great. All right, do I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve option number 1 as read by staff.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on item 5 on approving the EIR report?
If members of the,
Yes, sir.
Oh, head up
Would
to
you
the
please-
microphone. And let us know your name and your area where you live in.
Property owner, I own 155 acres up off Ridgeway Court. I'm just kind of finding out about this now from a neighbor. I bought the property about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, so I think it's going to impact my property. I'd just like to know, is there a way I can walk this with somebody to see where this is going to have an effect on the property?
Sir, could you tell me, do you know the Nielsen's? Okay, on to the east or to the west?
It'll be to the west.
Okay. The project could be there, so we'd be happy to get your name and contact information. It does start up there at Ridgeway Drive, cuts down that slope, and is mostly on the Nielsen's property, but I think it's a good idea. Let's walk that together.
I don't know how I get in touch with, or who I get in touch with.
I'll get in contact with you through our,
Actually,
Whatever step.
as soon as this item is over, you can get his information. So hang tight, don't leave the room, and maybe you guys could go out to the lobby and he'll get your contact information and reach out to you.
certainly.
Great. Do we have anybody online, Jennifer?
If members of the public would like to address the board on public hearing number 5, option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for instructions. President Day does not appear any of any additional members of the public wish to speak on public hearing item number 5. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
And yeah, if you guys could meet and exchange contact information, that'd be great. And we'll move to information item number 6.
President Day, would you like to close the public hearing at this time?
Yes, I would. I will close the public hearing at 9:32 a.m.
Good morning. John Money, Engineering Manager for the district, and I'm here this morning. We're going to give an update on our capital improvement plan project completion, or a summary of projects we've completed since last report to the board. So today we're going to review a couple things. First, again, a review of recent completed capital improvement projects, as well as a summary on the expenditures and project balances for those projects. Then we will also provide an overview of projects that are ongoing and in construction, as well as a brief summary on FEMA recovery efforts and ongoing grant applications. This is a summary of the projects that we have completed to date, or at least again since our last report to the board. In total, that's about 4.7 in construction dollars, or 4.7 million in construction dollars. Over this period, we have performed quite well. We are averaging about 2.2% in change orders, which again is kind of the diligence of engineering staff. You will notice that the change orders vary quite a bit. There is one that's fairly large, and again, change orders vary by complexity, budget, and location of the project. So that one where you see a 22.5% increase in change orders, that was in one of our wastewater treatment plants. We'll get to that as we get down the road. But typically, we expect change orders. Staff plans for up to 10% when we come to the board. One of our consultants thinks that anything under 8% is a grand slam. Again, it depends on if we get into existing utilities and kind of a busy site that can, industry average can get as high as 15 to 18%. It just really depends on the site and the budget and location of the project.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
This particular 22.5% seems to me, oh, thank you, seems to me as a red flag. And we have had problems before. So you said this is completed now.
It is completed. So when we get to that item, I'll discuss and kind of give you some background on where we ended up with that increase in change orders.
Okay, you will explain that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So moving on to our first project. Next slide. I always like the acronyms that we use. So the El Dorado Hills Wastewater Treatment Plant, Waste Activated Sludge, Dissolved Air Flotation Thickener.
You could lowercase daft.
So this has been an ongoing project. Again, it was identified, I think, just before I got here at the district 7 years ago. The DAF facility was originally constructed in 1997. So it was well at the end of its life. The metal components, if you've seen that top right-hand picture, had been fairly well corroded. That's actually a picture of the new DAF there. And as well, it's all the internals are housed in a concrete basin, and so that basin had a moderate amount of corrosion that had occurred on the inside of that as well, and some minor cracking. So we gutted the basin, put all new mechanicals in, treated all the concrete, and then also you see in that lower right-hand picture, we incorporated new pumps pumps and electrical for the facility, higher performance. Less maintenance pumps, and really it's been a really successful project to date. So, next slide. So planned expenditures on this project was 1.8 or almost 1.9 million. Total authorized for construction came back at 2.4 million. A lot of these costs, you'll see they're quite a bit higher than the planned CIP expenditures. And recently, that's been one for just general inflation we've experienced on our projects. One of the major drivers that affected this project and several others is the electrical cost. I think the electrical estimate came back almost double what the engineer's estimate was. And that's been pretty consistent across most of our projects. That being said, we were able to manage quite a few change orders on this project with the contractor and worked out kind of some intricate details with that electrical system, and also a realignment of some of our existing facilities that were, again, inaccurate on our as-built drawings. But regardless, we got to the finish line with about $300,000 still in contingency funds, and a total change order of just less than 1% on the project. Next project, please. I threw in a couple of our smaller projects as well. Some of these we don't necessarily come to the board with. I believe the Sly Park day use was, but you'll see two others that were authorized under the GM spending authority. But the Sly Park day use area has experienced some pretty severe wave and boating action or wave action on the west shore there at Jenkinson Lake. You can see in the top right-hand corner kind of a condition of the existing shoreline prior to this project. Staff went out for a brief design and then received bids from 3 contractors to restore that, to excavate, kind of stabilize the bank, and then place riprap. So you can see them actually mid-construction in the top right and kind of the completed project there on the bottom. Go ahead. Again, negotiating with the contractor, there were some minor site changes throughout construction, which actually reduced the bid price of this this project by about 0.5%. So again, a pretty successful project. I threw this one again as this was not included initially in the CIP plan. It is included under our wastewater treatment plant ongoing projects. But I threw this on here because water supply is not the only branch of our services that have steel tanks. And so this is a bolted steel tank that is our backwash recovery from our recycled water at El Dorado Hills. So plant staff brought this to our attention in that when the tank was originally constructed, it did not have a cathodic protection system equipped on the tank. And so again, we're trying to extend the life wherever we can of our facilities and kind of taking whatever notes we can from our ongoing steel tank issues. So staff approached us. We received some initial estimates from similar projects. Approached the GM under his spending an authority to do a small design, and we're actually able to find a pretty economical solution. Genevieve, you can go ahead to the next project. So we were planning on about $70,000 in repairs, and we were able to meet and identify a solution with a vendor for just under 20 grand. So again, came in exactly for that bid, so there's no change orders on that project as well. But again, as we're looking to prolong our assets and come up with economical solutions, I wanted to highlight this project. Now for the problem child. So this is the secondary effluent pump station modifications at our El Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant. So we had a couple issues go on when we were under construction on this facility. First and foremost, again, construction change orders, what you anticipate, again, it fluctuates on the scope, location, the complexity of this project. So first and foremost, what this was is the pipe you see in the bottom right, we were trying to expose this pipe and retrofit it with an air box so that it can release bound air from our secondary clarifiers during high flows. What was happening is the pump station that's just on the other side of this was getting airbound during high flow weather. That pump station pumps all of the flow for the treatment process, either to the storage reservoir or to our filter processes for recycled water or discharge to the adjacent creek. So when that's not functional, we lose about, actually there's 2 pump stations, we lose half of our capacity to do that. Operations staff has to rent temporary pumps, and it really puts them in a bind when we get into those high weather flows. So definitely a critical project. However, during construction, everything has to remain live. So that puts a huge risk factor on the contractor when this is the only pipeline that comes out of our secondary clarifiers. You can see the site on the top left. Is that concrete vault right there in the middle. Right on the right-hand side of that is our secondary clarifier. So really they're only about 15 feet away from where the contractor is doing construction. And then the pump station is just on the other side of this as well, so about another 5 feet north of that concrete structure. So again, a very constrained site, an active facility. When the contractor got out there and mobilized for construction, we went off of our as-builts, and our as-builts were incorrect. So our contractor got down to the pipe and then had to do a redesign as they were mobilized on site, so that was a cost overrun. They also hit a huge pocket of crushed gravel from the adjacent secondary filter. So that started caving into the site. So you can see on the bottom right hand, the metal sheet piles we had to drive adjacent to there to stabilize that rock pocket so that we didn't undermine the adjacent secondary clarifiers. And then there was one other sizable.
Wait until you come up to the
hand
microphone
it over
and
to
introduce yourself,
Tracy
please.
Eden Bishop was the project manager, so I'll let her fill in the last.
So yes, we did have some caving around the clarifier. And so that we had this over excavation, basically. The contractor had to clean all of that out. And then we had to backfill with low strength concrete to fill that in. So big quantities of backfill that we weren't expecting. So the contractor had to purchase that, place it, and get everything back in order. We had broken water lines, sidewalks were destroyed around the clarifier. So there were a lot of things that happened because of that rock pocket.
I guess the lesson here, it's one that we've heard a few times before, is when projects are complete, we all have a celebration of successful completion. But there's a few after-action items that need to be, we need to put a lot of attention on them. And one is the as-bills. You know, there's a tendency to take the construction design drawings and then proceed from there. And when it's all done, many times we fail to go back or fail to have the contractor go back and say, I know the design drawing said to do this here, but we thought it was a better idea to do this over here. And we say, yeah, that'll save us money, it's a good idea, et cetera. But we never go back and actually change the real as-built drawing. So we need to pay a lot of attention to make sure that we have a good record for 10 years from now, when we go back to do this again, what's actually in the ground.
Absolutely. I think it's just like having any other contractor at your house, or if you've ever experienced that. You see a lot of progress up front, and then it's always the little things at the end that are, you know, people, we're done, and it looks great, and we don't finish painting the trim or whatnot. So that is absolutely one of our closeout contract items. Our engineering staff, we do have drafting and GIS staff that handles recording of those and to getting those into our permanent records. So there is definitely a focus on that.
Do we take photographic documentation as we go along? Because I think that would, to connect that with the as-built would be very useful for future people.
We do, and we might want to actually show you guys. So we have incorporated an online platform called Procore for probably about the last 4 years. And that has been a tremendous help for our inspection staff. And in any of our contracted inspection work, we require them to use that. So when they're when inspectors are on site, they can snap pictures all day long with their cell phones or whatever device they have. And all of those are automatically updated and captured in Procore. And then they're retained throughout in perpetuity for the district's record. So really a huge bonus and kind of an advance with technology. So I will say Cody Smith sent me a picture of the finished project of this that I was tempted to put in here, but I didn't want to mess anything up with the presentation. But it really looks like you see on Disney, like the witches' cauldrons of the big bubbles coming up. That's what this looks like in a high flow event now that we've completed the basin. So again, just shows you how much air is being entrained there and fouling up those pumps. Oh, sorry, Cody Smith is our superintendent at the El Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant. So again, planned expenditures, we planned for just over 100,000. Saw a large escalation in labor right as this project was bid. And then we saw another change order again from or a substantial change order of almost 80,000 for the rock pocket and change site conditions once the contractor got on site. So this is one that we try to avoid, but I think, again, given that complexity, again, industry averages for this project would be somewhere in that 10 to 18% that you would expect. So we're not too far off. However, we definitely want to continue to do better and get our records more in order. Same plant, almost the exact same time, was the El Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant, filter 5 and filter 6 rehabilitation. I know Director Dwyer, I'm not sure if Director Anzini had been out there as well to see this facility. So filter 5 failed, I believe, in 2021. And so right about the time, what happened is we have 6 filters out there. They're all put in different times. 2 of the filters, 5 and 6, used a different, more technologically advanced, which translates to cheap, filter block material in the bottom of the basin. Filter 5 failed as we were doing a tech memo to see how to best retrofit that filter. Right as we wrapped up that effort, filter 6 failed for the exact same reason. So the underscreen you see in that the silver part of that top left picture had completely failed. The screws had come out, and so basically the sand media that filters the water was leaking into the system. I went back and looked at some of the photos on this, and you've seen pictures of our tanks, and this is basically an above-ground steel tank. So the interior of this looked just like some of the tank pictures you've seen, where it was very corroded and very degraded. So all new internals, all new epoxy paint. Really ended up being a very nice product. And again, this should last for another 15, 20 years. So. We're going to do our best. And again, so that's 2 out of the 6. So we still have 4 that we still have some. We've got to program in and make sure that we at least do that recoating and possibly some of the internals as well. Hopefully not on an emergency basis. So we did a little better on this one. Planned expenditures of about $2.2 million. Total construction or total authorized for the project was $2.1 million. We had a couple change orders on this one again for the epoxy coating and coatings on those basins. And kind of there's a large gap in there between the authorized for construction or authorized for the project. That should be authorized, total authorized for the project. And the construction award, because on this one, we did pre-purchase all of the mechanical internals based on the emergency schedule we were following to get these back online prior to the wet season. So 2.5% change order, again, on a very tight timeline, kind of complex project. 1/3 of our filtration capacity to take it offline. So again, a very successful project. Pinecone Campground paving. This is another project that within the first month I was at the district, I think I went out and I toured this one. The loop, the paved loop in the Pinecone Campground has had significantly degraded over time. It was rutted throughout, alligator cracking all the way throughout. So this was a project that staff put in to replace that paving. We also upgraded, you can see in that top left, the parking next to the one of the restrooms there to make it ADA compliant, which it had not been in the past. So pretty straightforward project. Go ahead, next slide. And again, it came in right on budget. I think we had a couple deductions for what we planned to pave and got us with a 1% under change order. Project 184 animal fencing replacement. There were several sections, again, of our flume and fencing, adjacent fencing that were damaged during the Caldor fire. This is a FERC requirement that we maintain access fencing along the canal. I think there's about 1.6 miles of fencing that was included in this project. I think it's pretty remote, pretty hard to get to terrain, and I think we had a couple. Go ahead, next slide. You can see in the top. Actually, there's the fencing right there. So it's 6 foot all along both sides of the canal. This is in the Mill Creek or Bull Creek area of the flumes. Go ahead.
I got a question,
Yep.
because the canal replacement, the damage that was done in the Caldor fire is the cause that we had to remove some of the fencing to get access. So are we using, is that part of our insurance and FEMA recovery request for the fencing?
It is. It is.
Okay.
So we will be pursuing reimbursement for this project as well as part of that larger FEMA project, ongoing.
it'll be a long time coming, right?
Overall, there were some, again, some change orders on this project. I believe we added a couple animal crossings. Again, it's hard to identify some of the changes in terrain until a contractor actually gets in there and adjust how he's going to get the fencing to accommodate those, given the remote nature of that project. So that drove the change orders on that one, and we came in just under 6% change orders that we will be pursuing reimbursement. Last project was the Marina Village Lift Station culvert replacement. So in June, I believe, of last year, following the preceding winter storms, operations staff noticed some severe erosion of the upstream face of the culvert that is in the access road to the Marina Village sewer lift station. At the time, I believe it had eroded up to about 8-10 feet along the 48-inch culvert that spanned this road. The gravity line that went into the station was completely exposed and kind of hanging there in the air. So really was a huge liability for the district. Staff issued an emergency contract, given the timeline before this year's storms, in order to get done with SRC. We bid the project, and I believe I don't think there were any change orders on this project. So SRC was able to get in very quickly. You can see, again, this was a pretty complex project. The picture on the right, you can see those two I-beams holding both the 12-inch pipe that drains into this lift station, as well as the 12-inch force main that pumps out of this lift station, that remained active while we completed this project. Instead of the 48-inch corrugated metal, which those pipes used to have 20 years, and I've seen as little as like 10, 12 years. So we replaced that with two concrete pipes to hopefully give us more like a 50 to 100 year life on that access road and culvert structure. So unfortunately, this project is not covered by FEMA or insurance because it's a road access, and that falls within different reimbursement buckets. But go ahead, Jen, next slide. Again, given the complexity of it, I think we got a pretty decent price, and no change orders on that project. So completed on time and within budget. Following up on our active projects, so in total, staff is currently assigned 90 CIP projects, which is pretty heavy workload for 6 engineers. Of those projects, about approximately $70 million has been authorized by the board for funding. These are multi-year projects, so these don't necessarily correspond with our CIP plan and the annual budget that goes on that, because they kind of roll from year to year. They include studies, basic design, construction, equipment procurement. So all that's kind of wrapped up within those projects. Specifically, out of those 90, we have 7 that are nearing completion. I would anticipate be complete within the next 3 to 6 months. And those projects are at a total authorized budget of $30.5 million. So we'll review those in the next couple slides. There are additional projects that have been awarded and that will be going into construction, such as our FEMA generators, Kipple Lake Well, that's right, or the campground well. Those are not included in this, but will be as we start in the next update, as we start or proceed to construction. So the largest of those projects, these next projects, is Motherlode Force Main Phase 3. Again, this was an emergency project to replace the sections of Motherlode Force Main that carries a good portion of the outline areas of Placerville down to El Dorado Hills, or to our Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant. This is composed of really 3 bridging projects along that alignment. I believe Phase 3A and 3B are 100% complete at this time. Paving still needs to occur on those 2 sections. Phase 3B needs to also be tied into our system. And the contractor will be mobilizing here in the next week or 2 to work on Phase 3C, which is approximately 50% complete. So we're anticipating the contractor will be wrapped up with tying everything in and final paving in probably August of this year. Today. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was this week or next week. And again, that's been a really good partnership with Tykert to date. 4-bay drop-off road water lines. This is actually 2 different water line sections. 4-bay water line and customer service lines were completed last year. However, final paving for that project has not been, or that segment has not been complete. We're waiting on warmer temps so we can get up there and pave per project specifications. Drop-off road, we're in kind of the same boat. I think Fair Camp is going to be out there either this week or next to start mobilizing on that project as well. So kind of the same timeline. We're anticipating about August of this year. We should finish up that second pipeline section and be done with that whole project. Bass Lake Tanks, been here a couple times on this project. This project was actually supposed to be complete beginning of this year, January, February. The contractor has, so that there's tank 1 and tank 2. Tank 1 interior was completed in a previous project. This project includes tank 2 interior coating, exterior coating, and the exterior tank 1, as well as quite a few structural repairs. So the structural repairs are complete. The tank has been primed. The contractor has really struggled with the epoxy that they have used, the coating. So we've been actively pursuing that with our on-site inspection. They've had to strip it a couple times, so we're making sure that they, again, do a complete coating, make sure it makes all the specs. So it's been a little bit of a slog, but they are making progress on that and expect to wrap that project up likely in June or July of this year. Reservoir A filter valve, we were just here, I think 2 board meetings ago for some additional funds on this one as well. This is a project to replace all of the intake valving for each of the filter basins. You can see the valves there in the top right picture and kind of where that valve is seated right there in the kind of middle portion of the middle bottom portion of the left-hand photo. This project, again, has had quite a few difficulties in that our as-builts were not as constructed. There's also been, so anyhow, so we're complete with 2 of the 3 filter clusters. We've also had some complications with the filter media project that was ongoing at the same time, kind of restricted some of the site access for this project. Staff has the contractor has pulled off of this project and will finish the 3rd cluster of filters as demands drop this fall. So we'll be wrapping that up probably early winter of this year, or it might bleed over to the very beginning of next year. And then Echo Conduit. This project, again, is substantially complete. We really kind of bent over backwards last year to make sure that it was functional so that we had some operational flexibility for this year, depending on how the weather and winter shook out. The contractor does need to remobilize to incorporate some safety features on this project, some rockfall netting, as well as some restricted access across the elevated section. And then most importantly, they've also had to pull out the crane pads that they've used to construct this site and demobilize. So we do anticipate coming back to the board for a change order for some of that work. Again, the contractor hit weather as we were trying to get that operational. And then when they also have there's always a charge when you have a contractor demobilize from a site and then have to come back in. They've got to take all that trucking and equipment mobilization has to be paid for. So on a positive note, insurance, our insurance claims we received our first insurance claim on this on Thursday for I think it's $940,000. So again, we are pursuing a full reimbursement for insurance on this project. So all in all, I think it's a successful project for the district.
Yeah, this one's been on our to-do list for a long time, and we've gone back and forth. Are we going to do it with in-house or contractor? And then the weather kind of made up our minds
For us.
And I think it's a good thing we got it done, and hopefully we'll recover some of the costs through the insurance. Then we can check it off the list and move on to the next 42 projects.
Absolutely. And it's so another thing that, again, just as being diligent, I was talking to Jackie Noel, our insurance adjuster, or in our claims. What is Jackie's title? Risk analyst. And so we are not only going for the reimbursement costs, but there also is a chance that there's some lost revenue from this. Again, because we use that water, we divert it over to North Fork of the American for power generation. So we'll be looking at that as well to make sure that we're whole from this project.
Just a comment, I've walked some of that pipeline, and it is extremely hazardous place to work. And you could fall off a long ways if you're not really careful. So whatever they have to do to ensure safe operations is well worth the money.
Absolutely. It's I mean, again, projects like that are, I think, what attracts a lot of staff working at the district, that it's very unique. I don't know that many people have had the opportunity to work on the side of a cliff overlooking Lake Tahoe. I mean, it's pretty fantastic. At the same time, there's cost for working in environments like that. So I think we have two more. The 2022 collection system rehabilitation. And again, this is just to clarify some semantics here. The 2022 collection system rehabilitation as identified in 2022 and it's designed. Usually it's bid the following year in 2023. So it has a project number. I'm going to make it more confusing of 2021, but these are annual projects that we address deficiencies within our wastewater collection system. So I believe this project included the rehabilitation of 16 manholes, the lining of approximately 2,300 feet of compromised pipeline, and then a replacement of 78 feet of failed pipe. So this project is largely complete. The manholes have been complete. Most of the lining has been complete. There is one line segment one segment that needs to be lined that's within a creek. As you can see on that far right picture, we used to not place our pipelines necessarily in ideal circumstances. So the contractor is working out a bypass plan to do that last segment outside of, again, kind of the wet season when flows are elevated. As soon as we get that worked out, we'll wrap this project up. And then I believe the last project that's under construction is the diversion facility upgrades. At our diversion facility up on the North Fork, this facility operates our fish screens, as well as all the electronics for the site, SCADA and controls. So this project brings those, actually built an enclosure around those, that green compressor tank you see out there in the top right photo. We're trying to weatherize this so that we have a little bit less maintenance for our operations folks in the middle of winter. Also provided a new generator for the site. I think the previous natural gas generator or propane generator had failed. And it also gave us a brand new power supply from PG&E so that we've got clean power and everything's on the same standardized.
I'm
power
always
source.
perplexed that we have the mandate to have the fish screen there, which is pretty expensive to build and keep in operational condition, to keep the fish out of the canal and out of the forebay, and then we turn around and stock the forebay with fish. Yeah, yeah, they do that for George, right?
That's correct. I'd have to refer to Dan to give any specifics on what drives that policy. But regardless, at the end of the day, we have to meet our regulatory requirements. That's part of our FERC permit, same as the animal fencing that we had mentioned earlier. That actually really does serve a purpose in keeping deer and whatnot from falling in the canal. But if we wanted to hold, we don't have the option on some of those projects to hold back or not do it. It's part of the permit. We just have to push on. So. I will not comment on that one. So again, summary of the project construction, we got about $30.5 million for those projects that I just summarized. We've got ongoing projects where FEMA generators are another couple million, and then we are intending to award Sled Park Intertie here a couple weeks out. So we're keeping busy, trying to keep on track with our projects across the district. Again, checking in on FEMA, as we alluded to earlier, we are still pursuing FEMA public assistance for both damage for the Caldor fire and the 2022-2023 storms. That process will be ongoing for probably several years now. And then we are also, again, pursuing funding opportunities from FEMA in the form of their Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, or their BRIC grants, and Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP. Again, we have been pretty successful on securing about $3.5 million in generators, which is under construction. We've also put in applications for assistance on our Flume 45 Section 3 project and Flume 48, and advanced assistance, which is basically the technical studies for Flume 46, which is our longest wooden flume, elevated wooden flume section, how we're going to tackle that and potentially get more grant funding from that. We've also approached them for I think both a BRIC and a HMGP for replacing the floating covers at Reservoir 1 and Pollock Pines. I think we've shown the board previous photos of damage that occurred during the fire in Oroville during those events. And kind of following up on Director Day's comments earlier, we've also sent a summary to the Water Agency for them to present at the upcoming Cap to Cap event to look for additional funding opportunities for those two facilities. Grant loan pursuits, again, I believe Madeline Kelsch is, who's a associate civil engineer for the district, is pursuing a $240,000 boating grant to improve boating access at Jenkinson Lake. We're in process of evaluating how we can tackle some water smart grants and retrofit some of our water meters throughout the district. And as we get into our larger projects upcoming with our water treatment plant improvements, we're continuing to evaluate the state revolving fund as well as other larger funding sources. I did get a notification that we've also put in the paperwork for hiring our grant analysts. We should be advertising for that position now that we've got that figured out. And some additional job duties that they'll be tasked with. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments from the board.
All right, any questions, comment? George, go ahead.
I've been talking to a few of the contractors that I'm familiar with, and they're saying that the cost of materials is just skyrocketed. And what does this impact our budget? I mean, they're just saying like 40 and 50% increases in just common stuff. And I just wondered how this is impacting our projections.
Moving forward, I think we're hoping to be a little bit more in line. I don't think anybody anticipated the inflation that we've seen over the last couple of years, and so that's why several of the projects, that I presented, if you look at what we initially planned in the CIP versus what they were bid at and the total cost of the project, there was quite a gap in there, and that was some of that inflationary pressure. I think a lot of the contractors currently that I've talked to, things are somewhat stabilizing, so I don't believe that they're anticipating the same large increases moving forward, although we do definitely anticipate at a more, steady rate rather than those sharp increases. Electrical, again, continues to be kind of a real thorn in the side in that not only are the prices elevated, but they're also months out from procuring any of, can be even just a breaker. So one of the things that has delayed the diversion facility project was we just had a couple breakers that we could not get for, well, actually the original ones as designed, I think were out 18 months. And we were able to work with the contractor and staff to find another solution that ratcheted that down more like 6 months. But generators, wire, anything in electrical has really been it's been problematic. So you got to adjust it for not only the increase in cost, but also what that'll do for your construction schedule. So we're doing our best to work with our consultants and kind of plan for that appropriately.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. That's information.
Director Day, if I could just compliment the engineering staff. We had pulled one project out, and on a percentage basis, it's high. The dollar amount was relatively low. It was like $80,000 out of a $4.7 million project list of 9 projects. And John, I want to thank you and Brian and the engineering team. I think you managed the projects extremely well. Coming in at 2.2% on that, outstanding job. So please pass that on to the engineers that aren't here.
Thanks, we appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on information item number 6? And the engineers flee the room.
If members of the public would like to make a comment on information item number 6, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on information item number 6.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now move on to.
Just a question.
Yes.
Would it be worth a public relations release just to reflect what our construction costs, material-wise, is doing? I mean, I think, the public, if they're not involved with any kind of construction, doesn't understand what's going on in the real world. And I just wondered if there's something that would be reflective of what's going on in the real construction world.
Well, I would say, I think most folks are very aware of what's going on.
Well, but if
Maybe
you're not
particular to-
involved with any kind of
construction, I know,
work,
but-
you know, it would, I just wondered if it would be worthwhile doing that.
We could, I can talk with Jesse and we can see if we can come up with something that's appropriate. Again, it's hard because everybody's aware the prices are elevated, but nobody wants to pay them. So it's
Yeah.
hard to thread that needle between, you know, watching our budgets, making sure that we're doing what we can to minimize those costs, but at the same time, just kind of dealing with the reality of where we currently are.
When we update the public through our waterfront and other mechanisms, we'll try and weave that component in. Jesse and I are working, or Jesse's doing the work, and we're just talking. But as we move forward on some of these projects, we want to explain to our customers with the rate increases that the board adopted, why we adopted them and why the project's needed and why the costs are so high, and really explain that to them. So we'll try and weave that in those articles.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to action item number 7, which is our warrant registers to pay our bills. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move option 1.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second for action item number 7. Is there any public comment?
If you would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for detailed instructions. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public would like to speak on action item number 7, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to action item number 8.
Good morning, President Day, members of the board. Jamie Bandy, Finance Director. I'm here this morning seeking a resolution declaring the intent to issue debt later this year for some capital improvement projects. Next slide, please. The last time that the district brought, or that staff brought an item such as this to the board was in 2014. At the time, we also issued about $41 million worth of debt for some water system improvements. Next slide, please. I think we skipped one. Okay, no, you're good. So our current 5-year financial plan does show some proposed debt issuances, the first one being for this year, 2024. The federal tax law does allow the district to reimburse or cover funds that we've expended for projects prior to that debt being issued. In order to do so, the district must adopt a resolution declaring its intent to issue that debt, and that is what the resolution before you today is intending to do. Next slide. So the board adopted the 2024 to 2028 capital improvement plan, as well as the 5-year financial plan, and both of those plans did include the proposed debt issuance that we're discussing today. Again, that debt issuance is intended to cover some capital improvement projects, which I'll discuss in just a moment, some specific projects. Other than that, our other CIP costs are intended to be covered by our current revenues on a pay-as-you-go basis. Again, external financing is necessary and very common for our significant capital improvement projects. Staff regularly evaluates the cost estimates as well as the scopes of work, and prior to our issuance later this fall, staff will also continue to refine the estimates for the projects that are included in this debt issuance. So as you may recall, in previous discussions, the projects before you are the intended projects that we are including in for the debt issuance for this year. The Sly Park Intertie improvements, the El Dorado Hills Water Treatment Plant improvements, as well as the Reservoir 1 storage replacement. In the event that one or more of the proposed projects do not occur for any reason as planned, staff also identifies additional projects that are included in the 5-year CIP as backup projects. Those projects include some flume and tank replacements, the 14-mile tunnel improvements, as well as the Reservoir 1 water treatment plant improvements. Taking a look at our current outstanding debt as of the end of 2023, the district totals $391 million. We do have about $14 million worth of payments scheduled for the current year, 2024. If we include the additional $70 million in this year, that will bring us to a total of $437 million. And to note, the total debt to total net capital assets ratio will be about 52%, which still keeps the district within that moderate range for water and sewer utilities. So the district will still be in good standing on its debt ratio. So board options. Option 1 is to adopt a resolution declaring the intent to issue tax-exempt obligations in the reasonably expected maximum principal amount of $70 million for acquiring certain public facilities and improvements. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action. And staff recommends option 1.
All right, is there any board questions?
Alan? Based on our excellent bond rating, what's the current rate going right now for municipal bonds?
Yeah, we actually just recently had a meeting with the financial advisors and bond counsel, and currently it's about 5% that we're looking at. So depending on, the next 6 months or so, what that's going to look like, we'll see.
Okay. Do we have a proviso in our bond issuance that if in fact the rates decline, that we can call those rates a fixed date? I mean, I can remember some of our other bonds where we called them early because of the rate we had.
Yeah, the way that we take advantage of rates decreasing would be a refinance of the current bonds, and that is an option.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't there usually like a set period, the first 3 years, 5 years, something like that, where you can't refinance it, then after that you can?
Typically, yes, and those, that will be spelled out specifically in the official statement once those bonds are issued.
Okay. Pat?
I'll move option 1.
All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll just make some comments. I don't think you'll be surprised. I'm very uncomfortable with this. And I would, as I did before, argue that I think in particular the 2 water treatment projects, while I support them and feel we need to do them at some time, I think that extending the time period to start those projects would reduce the amount of this debt. And again, I'm not against using bonds. I think that's the reality of the world we operate in, and we have to do that. But again, I think that we could ease pressure on our rates and ease pressure on our indebtedness and extend the timeline on some of these projects. So that's where my thinking is on this.
Just looking at the future agenda items to address that, Brian Mueller is bringing the Water Master Plan to the board in June, I believe it is, and will include a tour of the El Dorado Hills water treatment plant and show you personally the assets that we would like to have replaced before they fail. So I think that will be an opportunity for the board to, kind of poke the water treatment plant assets and say, oh, do we really need to do this or not? So I think that will address your concern on that. And then moving forward, the board just authorized the CEQA document on the Sly Park intertie, which is a critical project we'd like to do. That estimate, construction estimate and bid documents will be before the board hopefully in June. And then financing for that would occur probably in August to help pay for that. And that $70 million would be a good chunk of that to pay for the intertie project.
If I could, on the tour that I mentioned with the water agency, Brian and Dan and company gave us a pretty good look at the water treatment plant in El Dorado Hills and mentioned that during peak demand, that plant came very close to not being able to supply the required water for El Dorado Hills. And so I think those upgrades were probably necessary 2 years ago. So I don't think it's too soon to take care of that problem before we actually affect our ability to deliver water to our customers.
Yeah, all that will be pointed out on that tour we want to do with the board, so you really see up front and personal the assets we need to replace.
Hello. Okay, is just a matter of time, you know, as someone who has recently gone through a series of house do-it-yourself problems in trying to find pieces and parts, I see our EID system so important to so many people. And currently, the bond market is not as bad as it might be in 2 years, because as our stocks go down, bonds go up, and it may be more expensive for us to go through this in 2 years. You know, it's really important that El Dorado Hills community, who's at the bottom level, but the most highest used district when it comes to water needs, that we not subject that to a secondhand or we cannot stop this at this point, simply because what we've done is try to catch up on the upper part of our system, and we've kind of like narrowed down what needs to be done on the bottom part of our system, which is the most fruitful. So it's really important that we keep our equipment up to par. And like I said, a 30-year-old house, all of a sudden, every pipe is breaking in my house, and I have to repair it for another $150 an hour from some plumber. And, you know, just in the narrow sense of it, we've got such a big system that we cannot deny this. And I hate doing bonding. I hate it, but that is the way governments operate. And so long as our staff members are cognizant of the products that is being used and making sure that they're top quality rather than secondhand quality, I have no problem with this. So I will be supporting it.
One of the good things about bonds, though, in asset-intensive industries always use bonds, is that future customers 20 and 30 years from now will be paying those bonds. It's not 100% of the burden on existing customers.
Well, I'll definitely join the tour and give you an opportunity to persuade me, change my mind. All right, is there any public comment on this item 8?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 8. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, voting aye. Division 5, voting no. Motion carries.
All right, thank you, Jamie. All right. Our last action item, number 9, a contract change.
Good morning, President Day and members of the board. Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the board, for the district and the board. And I will be presenting this item today, which is a contract change order for additional environmental services associated with our additional point of diversion project for water right permit 2112. For the previous board actions, we did limit it to the items directly related to this particular contract with AECom. So you'll see the original award of the contract, as well as there was a prior change order in October of last year. So it's been approximately 6 months since we were in front of the board regarding this project. As you recall, the district is pursuing a water right change petition to add a point of diversion as well as a place of storage to our existing water right permit 2112. This has required some expanded scope for the environmental analysis, largely related to the very extensive modeling effort for this project. And due to the additional demands for the environmental analysis, we are requesting approval of a contract change order in the amount of $134,594. In addition, we are seeking funding for some of the application fees at this time as well, associated with the change petition itself. So I am going to provide just a brief project overview to give us all context in terms of what we're talking about. I'll also be providing an update of what we've been up to over the last 6 months, as well as the subject change order and funding request for today. So this is an existing water right. It currently authorizes the district to divert up to 17,000 acre-feet for consumptive use. This is a very dynamic water right. It includes both direct diversion, diversion to storage, as well as releases from storage. But importantly, our authorized point of diversion for consumptive use is limited to Folsom Reservoir. And then we have 3 different storage rights at Caples, Aloha, and Silver Lakes for a combined total storage of approximately 33,000 acre-feet. So very dynamic water right. What we are seeking to do is modify that existing water right, essentially to provide more flexibility for the district as we try to meet future anticipated water demands. And so what we would like to do is add an upstream point of diversion at our existing El Dorado diversion dam for consumptive use purposes, as well as a place of storage in Jenkinson Lake, essentially to act as kind of a drought augment for those difficult years. We would maintain the existing diversion at Folsom. And importantly, from a water rights perspective, we are not seeking to increase either the maximum allowed use per year, neither are we seeking to increase the total storage allowed. So this is a flexibility and efficiency project. It's not an expansion of our water right, because we're not allowed to do that. In terms of where we are seeking to add the point of diversion at El Dorado Diversion Dam, there are some efficiencies for this particular location. We do divert other water rights already at this location, so we would have the ability to utilize existing infrastructure. And really, I think of this as we have an existing straw. Currently, that straw is largely dedicated to conveying water for non-consumptive hydropower purposes. However, as our customer demands increase in the future, we're going to need to shift some of the water in that straw from a non-consumptive power purpose to a consumptive purpose. And so where you see the effect of that is that less water would be returned to the system in the South Fork of the American River below the powerhouse, because now that water is essentially being routed to meet our customer demands instead of flowing through the powerhouse and then being returned to the river. Importantly, for this project, we are seeking the ability to store water in Jenkinson Lake. I think as we're all aware in California, often when water is available is not when we need it most. And so with the ability to store this water in Jenkinson, we would be able to divert during those high flow, early spring months such as we're in now, put that into storage in Jenkinson Lake, and then draw that down as we move into the peak summer demands. And so for the more visually inclined, this is a follow the water graphic. So to your right is the existing, our existing Khyber's El Dorado diversion dam, but the proposed additional point of diversion for permit 2112. From there, we would have the ability to route this water in two directions. So it could either go straight through Forebay to Reservoir 1 water treatment plant, essentially to meet current demands. Or more likely is it would travel through the Hazel Creek Tunnel over to Jenkinson Lake for storage purposes, but it also would have the ability to kind of float on top of Jenkinson Lake to meet reservoir aid demands instantaneously as well. And so I will move on to what we've been up to in terms of the modeling effort as well as the environmental review effort. I think as you've heard me say before, this is a very modeling dependent project. Essentially with a water rights project, the question we have to answer is how will the system be affected hydrologically when we propose a change in terms of how we divert, where we divert, and what effect will that have on the system? The only way to answer that question is with extensive and costly modeling, unfortunately. And so we are doing hydrologic modeling as well as specifically temperature modeling. These are essential tools for any water right project such as this. So they will directly support both the water rights change petition application process as well as the CEQA environmental review process. For this particular effort, we utilize not one, not two, but 3 modeling tools. So we have our essentially upstream model, which is the HEC-ResSim model. That models both EID's operations as well as SMUD's operations on the South Fork of the American River. And then the results of that model essentially feed into the CalSim model, which is more designed to model the operations of the Central Valley Project and State Water Project operations. And then those results are fed into a specialized modeling tool that looks at specifically temperature effects in both Folsom Reservoir, cold water pool, as well as water temperature management in the Lower American River. I wanted to just highlight, as if 3 models was not enough complexity, I wanted to just highlight some of what is happening within these models. So the model is fed 45 years of actual hydrology. So we have a modeled system of what has the South Fork of the American River experienced for the last 45 years. We then run different operational scenarios against each of those hydrologic years. So how would the system behave in the 1976 drought with these operations? How would it behave in the recent 24 and 2015 drought? And so we run that against 2 baseline conditions. We determined that we need 2 baseline conditions because we need to reflect both our current water demands and how we operate to meet those water demands, but we also need to represent how would we meet future water demands even without the project, so a future baseline, and that is projecting our 2045 anticipated demands in our urban water management plan. So we need 2 baseline conditions to compare, and then we compare both the proposed project operations as well as we have 4 project alternatives. So you can start to see the layers of complexity building in terms of just how much work the model is doing to get us the information we need. In addition, we are modeling 2 different operational phases. So one is essentially utilizing just existing infrastructure with no improvements However, we wanted to make sure we had the ability to essentially fully exercise this water right. That water right has a maximum diversion rate of 156 CFS that's authorized. We wanted to make sure we had the ability to divert at that rate. However, to route this water through Kybers, Hazel Tunnel, Hazel Creek to Jenkinson, there are some conveyance constraints that we would have to address to be able to flow that full 156 essentially through the system. So we therefore modeled both an existing infrastructure operational phase, but we also modeled essentially a post-construction in terms of how we would divert if we had the conveyance capacity of 156.
So for the lack of a better term, where are the choke points in the system? Is it in the
There are several. So in order to route essentially the full canal capacity into Hazel Creek Tunnel, we would have to do some adjustments essentially at the routing into Hazel Creek Tunnel. And then once the water exits Hazel Creek Tunnel, it goes into essentially kind of a drainage path, but some of that drainage path and some of the culverts in that drainage path really couldn't handle 156 without some erosion concerns or topping over of the culverts. So there's a couple different choke points that we would have to address to get up to that full 156. And so really we're trying to paint a very complete picture of how would we operate in all of these different hydrologic scenarios with both current and future water demands and with both either existing infrastructure or infrastructure improvements. So lots of layers in the modeling.
Before you go on, it seems like there's a couple of things here. I always have a problem with using 45 years of data to model the next 200 years out because we could be catching it on an upslope, on a downslope. You know, and I guess that's just a general criticism of our climate modeling altogether. The other thing is, question I have is, the El Dorado Water Agency is spending a lot of money on modeling the watershed. How closely do we fit into their efforts or their efforts fit into ours? How are we coordinating these things or doing them in isolation? What's going on?
Yes, thank you. We have coordinated with the water agency. I think they have a different project, and so they're asking different questions, and they are making, I think, some different assumptions about build out, where development may occur, where water demands may occur. And so I think just based on the fact that we have different proposals, we have kind of different assumptions about what the future looks like, or even the timeline that we're trying to address. So we are definitely trying to coordinate, but I think we're kind of looking at different questions, and so we are using different assumptions as well. But to the extent we can have synergy with those efforts, we'll certainly try to do that. I think our timeline, I would consider somewhat more of a more near horizon. We're looking at essentially 20 years out in our urban water management plan. So I think we may have a little bit more detail and resolution on what we're trying to address, and there's maybe a little bit longer horizon planning.
I'd just like to add that they're looking at paper water demands all the way down through South County, like to Fairplay and other locations. The cost of infrastructure to take water all the way down there will probably be cost prohibitive, but that's what they're looking at is, can they provide water to the entire county, maybe in 100 years, where we're looking at it much more near term.
Thank you. So I am happy to report that we are done with the modeling. So I, of course, will caveat any statements such as that to say that there may be some additional modeling that we do either in response to stakeholder outreach or perhaps in comments received on the draft EIR once that is released. But in terms of our effort to model both the proposed project as well as the alternatives, that effort is finally complete. We very recently completed the temperature modeling. Those results look very promising for the project, very little effect on the system. We're not talking about a large quantity of water relative to the South Fork of the American River. So those results look very promising, but we will be conducting specific stakeholder outreach now that we have the temperature modeling results for those that are particularly interested in Folsom Reservoir and temperature management of the Lower American River. So we wanted to make sure we had those modeling results before that focused stakeholder outreach effort. And then moving on to the environmental review. So we've been trying to advance the environmental review process concurrent with the modeling effort. And as I've emphasized, the environmental analysis is heavily dependent on the modeling results to inform that analysis. In particular, some of the resource areas that are often of the most interest in our area, such as hydrology, biology, recreation, including whitewater recreation, as well as energy and hydropower effects. All of those directly rely upon the modeling that we've been conducting, but we have been trying to advance the EIR as the modeling has advanced. So we're well on our way with that, and we're currently forecasting release of the draft EIR in June of 2024. And so I will now move on to the action of the day, which is the contract change order and funding request. Any additional questions on the status or the project before I move to that? Okay. So the level of effort to review and integrate the modeling has exceeded our forecasts. So there is a ton of data that is being processed, reviewed by multiple authors of these different resource categories. EIRs tend to be authored. Each chapter has kind of a specialist that authors that particular chapter. So you have multiple authors kind of having to chew through a very large amount of data. And in particular, the addition of that future baseline, the 2 operational phases, as well as we have additional project alternatives beyond what was originally anticipated. When you kind of layer all of that with just the volume of data in the modeling, you get time. And time tends to equate to money. And so we have found that we need additional time and resources to get the draft EIR to the finish line. At this time, we are requesting a change order in the amount of $134,594 for these additional environmental review services. And so you'll see that amount reflected in the funding request, as well as the calculated change petition application fees, which are required by the State Water Board, as well as there's a fee that goes to the Department of Fish and Wildlife Services. So we're seeking those fees as well for a total funding request of $143,244. And so option 1 is award a contract change order to AECom in the not to exceed amount of $134,594 for environmental services, and authorize additional funding of $8,650 for application fees for a total funding request of $143,244 for the permit 2112 change and point of diversion project. And we are recommending option 1.
All right, thank you. Any board questions? All right, do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second.
Motion, I presume it's option 1, move option 1 and seconded. Is there any board comment? Any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 for instructions. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 9, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and second by Director Dwyer. I believe that we are ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
All right, we'll now be moving to closed session. And we have 3 items. Council, do we have a time estimate?
Yes, thank you, President Day. The board will be meeting in closed session regarding the items listed as closed session items A, B, and C on today's agenda. I anticipate that this will require at least 30 minutes, but may require additional time.
But it may require additional time. So we'll be adjourning the meeting and stopping the recording. We will return at no sooner than 11:25, but it could well be later than that.
We're just recessing, we're not adjourning.
Excuse me, recessing.
So we're going to stop this Zoom session while you're in closed session. However, we will take it back up for the report out.
Yes. All right, thank you. All right, we are back in session at 12:14. Council, do we have anything to report?
Thank you, President Day. The board met in closed session regarding the items listed as closed session items A, B, and C in today's agenda. Regarding closed session item A, the board met and provided direction, but took no reportable action. Regarding closed session item B, the board met and provided direction, but took no reportable action. And regarding closed session C, the board met and provided direction, but took no reportable action. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And do we have any assignments?
No review of assignments for this meeting, but I think that you had an announcement. And if we can all just, if the board members can remember to take a look at the tentative items, and if you have any questions, please reach out.
Do you want me to make an announcement, or we're going to,
The tentative cancellation,
for the first meeting in May?
No,
tentative cancellation of the April 22nd meeting.
you don't have,
I don't even have that on my agenda. I mean, on my calendar. I thought we didn't have it.
so, due to lack of items, the district is considering canceling the April 22nd board meeting. If we do indeed cancel, we will send a notice of cancellation on the Wednesday prior, and the next regular board meeting will be May 13th, 2024.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned. 12:16.